Welcome everybody to our Sunday morning learning at the Alshech Academy. I'm absolutely delighted to have with us one of the most prominent archaeologists in Tzfat and renowned in the whole of Israel and abroad. We're delighted to have Yossi Stepansky here with us, and he's going to give us two lectures. One will be on the history of Tzfat, and then we'll pause and then do a specific lecture on the giants of Tzfat, meaning the giant rabbis who made Tzfat what it is. And today we'll start with Yosef Karo. We're delighted also to all our sponsors and grateful to all our sponsors, and particularly we are doing this learning in Le'ilul Neshama Tzvi Ben Ari HaKohen. May he get an aliyah. And we're delighted to hand you over to Yosef. He will be sharing some materials which we'll put on the screen, but you will also have those who have access to the Alshech WhatsApp group. We have already posted on the Alshech WhatsApp group the photographs, some of the photographs that he'll be talking to, so please feel free to tap into that. Thank you.
Okay, Boker Tov. Before we begin with an introduction, a short introduction to the history of Tzfat, in a half hour, I need about 2 months to talk about the history of Tzfat, and so we'll talk a little bit about an introduction to the history of Tzfat. But before that, and before I forget, Shlomo, yesterday, Parshat Truma.
Yes.
And when I was in my shul, in the Noam Shul in the Saraya in Tzfat, we have a perush. It's called Da'at Mikra in Hebrew. Da'at Mikra from Musar Rav Kook, very well known, a commentary on all the Tanakh. And each sefer, each book is a perush of somebody else. And Shmot is by Amos Chacham. And I looked in the parasha, and I found there 13 illustrations of the Mishkan, because the Truma, of course, talks mostly about the Mishkan. It goes down into detail. 13 illustrations by the architect Yaakov Yehuda, who lived here in Tzfat. He founded our shul in the Saraya, the Noam Shul. Noam is his grandchild, who was killed in the First Lebanese War. His son David Yehuda, Harav David Yehuda, okay, and his daughter-in-law Shoshana is still with us, and there are 13 illustrations there by the architect who lived here in Tzfat. He was also the engineer of Tzfat, the municipal engineer of Tzfat, even before 1948, from 1947, even before.
Wow. Okay,
so if anybody wants to go into Dat Mikra, look at the 13 Tzfati illustrations of the Mishkan. He built a whole model of it. It was presented at the fair in Tel Aviv, and then afterward, he built the model of the Beit HaMikdash, which was presented at the World's Fair in 1939. So he's from Tzfat. He's the founder of our shul here in Tzfat also. So I just mentioned something about the Parashat Truma. That was yesterday.
Was he involved in the Holy Land?
He was where in?
Involved in the Holy Land project?
Yes, he was an advisor to Avi Yonah, who designed the model of Yerushalayim. I think he was the main advisor how to build in the model the Beit HaMikdash itself. So that's mentioned Yaakov Yehuda Zal. And Tzfat, I know we're talking for many times. People come to Tzfat especially to be in the city of the Ari Kadosh and of all the great rabbis who lived in the 16th century. Yes, the 16th century is the golden age of Tzfat. But not many people, even living in Tzfat, know that Tzfat itself is 4,000 years old. It's more than 4,000 years old. Okay, it has a long history. We've done some archaeological excavations. And this we know, the rabbis of Tzfat, they knew without excavations. For years, the rabbis of Tzfat delved into what was here in the time of the Bible. And some of them said, they think we're one of the cities of the Levites, of the Leviim. Maybe Kartan. We're certainly in Naphtali. that everybody knows, because in Gematria, Naphtali is Tzfat. So we're in the center, the geographic center of the portion of Naphtali. That's known. But no, the rabbis didn't have proof. So how did they know? They knew. And but in our generation, when we archaeologists started surveying and excavating, we found what the rabbis knew for years. That Tzfat is an ancient site, goes back to the time of the Bible. Where was ancient Tzfat? So I have here 2 blow-ups, okay? And Shlomo, you can show it. And let me show the Metzuda up here at the tippy top. There it is, okay? The Metzuda, the high part of Tzfat, okay? We all know there was a Crusader castle there, but not everyone knows that we're talking about an archaeological mound. People have been living on top of Tzfat at the mound of the Metzuda for 4,000 years. Okay, that I found in my survey. And here maybe in this other, you can even see maybe a better perspective. Here we have from the south looking, the new part of Tzfat. At the top we have the Metzuda. Okay, it's not only a Crusader castle, it's also an archaeological mound. And already about 4,200 years ago, people have been beginning to live here. And here, I think we can see from here like this, Shlomo, right? I think?
Yeah.
Okay, we can see here the bronze weapons, spearheads, knives, axes. These go back about 4,000 years ago. We found this in one of our excavations down on the slopes of the Metzuda, right near the religious high school. Okay, but these are people who lived. These belong to people who lived in Tzfat, and it seems that the Canaanites who lived here then, some of them were warriors. They were buried with their weapons. Okay, so that was an excavation we did in 1986. So, and then I did surveys, not only me, but we had a crew, and we did surveys of the mound. We all knew for years that there's a Crusader castle up there. We didn't have proof that people lived there even 4,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago until we started finding the pottery, including pottery from the time of the Iron Age, which is the time of Naphtali, time of the tribe of Naphtali, who came. I also found and I published pottery from that time also. And so it seems that Tzfat is settled consecutively from then until today. Not all the time Jews, okay? Jews came a little more than 2,000 years ago, 2,100 years ago, the Hashmonaim. But in the time of the Israelites, in the time of, let's say, David, Shlomo, okay, and the northern kingdom of Israel, who lived in Tzfat, the Israelites of the northern kingdom. Okay, we had a king called Achav, and we had a queen called Izebel. Eshet Zevel. She was our queen here in Tzfat. We were under her jurisdiction.
They lived in Tzfat?
No, they lived in Shomron. And in the winter, they went to their winter palace in Jezreel, okay? In Israel, okay? In the valley of Jezreel. And that's where Izebel, she died there. She was thrown down from the window. Okay, that's not far from here. That's in the Emek, in the valley of Jezreel. But we were under their jurisdiction. Okay, we're in the north, we're in the upper Galilee. And in 733 BCE, the Assyrians came and took us away. What do you mean us? I think we here and most of the people maybe listening to us now, okay, we're Jewish. Then they were Israelites, they weren't Judaites. Because then there were two kingdoms. There was the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel.
Right.
And here were Israelites who went to exile to Assyria and maybe even further east. Who knows where they are, as part of the 10 tribes. They got lost. Okay, we have today here in Tzfat, Bnei Menashe, we have from Menashe people, beautiful people. Okay, they're here with us in Tzfat. Okay, they're one of the 10 lost tribes. Okay, but so far, for all I know, the tribe of Naphtali hasn't been found yet. We have to look for them. And we'll welcome them back here in Tzfat. They want to come back to Tzfat to be with us. But that happened in 733. Tiglat-Pileser came and he exiled the Israelites from this whole area. 10 years later, he conquered Shomron, Samaria, and that was more or less the end of the Israelite kingdom, which was stronger than the Judahite kingdom. Mm-hmm. And whoever was left here and didn't go to exile, they went to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So that's when the kingdom of Judea, Yehudah, Chizkiyahu, Yoshiyahu, that's when they got strong, okay? And they were exiled, like we know, in the exile of the first temple, okay, 587 BCE. But here, Tzfat, in this area, we already exiled in 733 BCE, don't forget, we're talking about before the Common Era, BCE. After the Israelites left, for hundreds of years, Tzfat wasn't empty, but it seems that the material finds we find in the surveys and excavation of pottery and things like that belong to Phoenicia. Okay? There were probably pagans here for hundreds of years until the end of the 2nd century BCE. About 120, 110, probably a little before 100 BCE, Jews started coming to Upper Galilee from Judea with the Hashmonaim, right? Hanukkah. Tzfat is part of the Hanukkah celebration. Mm-hmm. Not only because Jews came to live here, but also we have the tradition that the oil that was brought to the menorah came from here. Okay, it took them 3-4 days to come and 3-4 days to go back, and that's why the miracle is 8 days.
So Tekoa was not Tekoa today.
Okay, Tekoa, from where they brought the oil, is in the Galilee, and there's also Tekoa in Yehudah, in Judea. There are 2 Tekoas, like there's 2 Beit Lechems. And you know what? There's more than one Tzfat. There's also a Tzfat in the Negev. There's also Beit Lechem, Yehudah, and Beit Lechem Haglilit. So there are 5 places called Tzfat in Israel, but we're the nicest, we're the best one. We're Tzfat in the Galilee. And so many people ask, when did the first Jews come? So I have to explain, there were Israelites here first, but the Jews, Yehudim, Yehudah, the Jews came with the Hashmonaim 2,100 years ago. And I gave a lecture once trying to prove, and I think I did, that Jews have been in Tzfat consecutively since then. We're the only city in the land of Israel, I think, that Jews never left in the last 2,000 years. Okay, and we know even in the low ebb, even in the time when we were a small minority, in the Middle Ages, in time of the Crusaders, when they built a big castle here, we'll mention soon. We were a small community, but we were here. There were mustarabim. There were people here, peasants who worked the land in the villages, and Tzfat was like a small center for them. Even in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, okay, even then Tzfat had a Jewish community, and even people here in Tzfat had the hope, even then, of renewing the Sanhedrin, not only in the 16th century, but even in the 12th century. In the 13th century, in 1211, Yehuda el-Khalizi was here in Tzfat, and he met the last Gaon of Israel. Gaonim, you know the Gaonim, okay? How do you say Gaonim in English? The Gaonim?
Excellencies.
The Gaonim who lived in Babylonia, they were Gaonim in Israel also.
Yeah.
Okay, and they sometimes argued, you know, which community has the right to declare Ibul Shana, okay, a leap year, like this year.
It's in the Gemara, actually.
In the Gemara, of course, there are arguments. The Babylonian community or the community of Israel. In Israel, the announcement should be made. And they argued about these. So there were Gonim in Eretz Israel also, and the last one to be seen and for somebody to meet was here in Tzfat. I don't know if he lived here, but he was met. El Khalizi met him in Tzfat here about 1218 CE. His name was Tzadok HaTzadik, Rosh Yeshivat Gaon Yaakov. So he's the last Gaon. The last Gaon was here in Tzfat. So that means there was a Jewish community here in Tzfat, even in his time. So certainly later on, okay, in the 16th century, the heyday of Tzfat, but even in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, there were Jews here in Tzfat. The first Mekubal, among the first, there were Mekubalim here in Tzfat. The Kabbalists in Tzfat were here already in the 13th, 14th century. 14th century, Rabbi Shem Tov Ibn Gaon was here. And he may be considered the first Mekubal in Tzfat. Okay, Kabalah. Okay, and I'm not an expert in Kabbalah. You have your experts coming to teach us. And there were Kabbalists before Tzfat, before the heyday of Tzfat. Okay, and Abu Lafia and others.
Yes, he was in Akko.
Okay, in Akko already in the 13th century. The heyday of Akko, of Jewish Akko, is 13th century. In Akko, there were 40,000 people then. In the 13th century, Akko was bigger than London in the 13th century. But then the Mamluks kicked out the Crusaders in 1291, and then Tzfat became the most important city. It wasn't only for the Jews an important city. It was the biggest city in all of Israel. They called it Palestine then. Israel, in all of Israel then, Tzfat was the biggest city. It was bigger than Yerushalayim. It was even bigger than the second biggest one. No one guesses what's the second biggest city in Israel then. Let's say 600 years ago, 700. After Akko went down, Tzfat went up. What was the second big one? It wasn't Yerushalayim.
Tveria?
No, not Tveria. Tveria was important 1,500 years ago. Aza. We want to forget about Aza.
Whoa.
But we can't forget about Aza. They're not letting us forget about Aza. But now Rafi knows. Rabbi Yisrael Najala went from Tzfat to Damascus to Akko, to Aza. He was the rabbi of Aza. Rabbi Yisrael Najala wrote the Yaribon Olam Olmaya. I don't know if he wrote it in Tzfat, but we say in Tzfat he wrote it here. And he, in the end, he was a rabbi of Aza, and he's buried in Aza. So that's more or less an introduction. But I'll say a few more words because we have until 10:30,
Yes.
right? If anybody wants to get a whole history of Tzfat in a summary, so we wrote a history in English. I'm thinking of things written in English because most of it is written in Hebrew. But in English, for instance, we have the Encyclopedia of Archaeological Excavations in the Holy Land. Okay? And not so many years ago, we have volume 5 that came out in English, and we wrote a number of pages on a summary on the archaeology of Israel. Here's a picture that we showed you before of the bronze weapons, okay? But not only that, we have all kinds of things we found in the excavation of the Crusader castle, okay? Things that we can define halachically as avodah zarah. Look at this, an idol. The Christians were here. Yeah, they were here, and they had their cathedral, and they had idols. They were here in Tzfat from 1100 until 1266.
It's not just decoration?
No, it's not a decoration. It's an idol. It's a pesel. It's a jewel. And okay, we all know in Tzfat that on top of the hill they built a Crusader castle. It looked something like this. Okay?
It's an artistic.
But I'll have to tell you, this is a picture of another Crusader castle that's still standing today, more or less. It's in northern Syria.
Oh.
Okay, it was damaged greatly in the Civil War. But we think that the one in Tzfat looked like this, a twin, because we know the plan. We know the plan of the. We have a plan. We know the plan of the castle here in Tzfat, and the plan is very similar to the one in Karek de Chevalier in northern Syria. Okay, I was never there. I was all over Lebanon. In Lebanon also we have all kinds of castles and high mountains. In Lebanon, Harei Lebanon, okay, they reach 3,000 meters high. The Hermon, the highest point in the Hermon, which is not in our hands, in Syria, is about 2,600, a little more. The Hermon, our Hermon, is 2,200 meters above sea level. Okay? So, Tzfat, we're also the highest city in Israel. City, not town. There's Majd al-Shams in the Golan, but a city, we're the highest city elevation-wise.
It's higher than Jerusalem?
Yes, because Canaan reaches 900 meters.
Because Jerusalem getting also snow.
Yes, but not only that, Tzfat, the city of Tzfat, goes from 300 meters Akbala to Canaan 900 meters. So Tzfat also has the highest grade slope from 300 to 900. Canaan is 900 meters. Okay? And we all know that around us here we have important army bases. And to our sorrow, the Hezbollah, they also know where they are. Yeah. Okay, but we're in a high area here. We're not on the border itself. We're a little behind. That's why we have all the command bases here. And everybody knows, everybody knows this. So Tzfat is also interesting for its topography. It's on a slope. Anybody living in the Jewish quarter knows very well about this slope. And even I live outside of the Jewish quarter, but my house is underneath, so we're flooded sometimes, okay? And now we have, Baruch Hashem, so much rain. And this influenced also, throughout the years, people living here, even the Jews living in the Jewish quarter, okay? It wasn't easy, even without the earthquakes that we had. It wasn't easy living here, but they did. They kept living here, and they survived through all these troubles for so many years. The Jewish quarter itself is the oldest Jewish quarter, as a Jewish quarter in Israel. It goes back 600-700 years as a Jewish quarter. Okay? Even in Yerushalayim, Hebron, the Jewish quarters there formulated only later, but here we know of a Jewish quarter. We know the Ari Sfaradi Shul is about 600-700 years old. That means there was a Jewish quarter here. And that's interesting, because we know the other Jewish quarter in Hebron, Yerushalayim, okay? But let's say 600-700 years ago, we don't know of a Jewish quarter in Yerushalayim. They lived among others. But here we have the Jewish quarter. It seems it was probably larger than it is today in the 16th century. I think probably where you live in the Kiryat Omanim, okay? Maybe part of it was part of the Jewish quarter. We don't really know. Maybe the next generation will know. If we do excavations in the Kiryat Omanim, in the Artist Quarter, maybe we'll know more. Maybe we'll find a Hebrew inscription there or something.
Could you talk about the age of this particular building, the Alshech building? There's some question as to how old it is.
I'll tell you, to give an exact date for any building, it's not enough looking at the walls. You have to do an archaeological sounding, especially by digging underneath the floor. When you dig underneath the floor and you find something that you can date, that'll give the terminus post quem. That'll give the earliest date possible for the laying of the floor. Usually the floor is laid at the time when the building is constructed. Okay, but even sometimes the building falls down in an earthquake. So they take away the rubble, but the floor is still there. Only rarely is a whole floor taken apart. Even in our private houses, it's very rare that you take apart a whole floor unless you want to put, a heating system underneath. But in old times, they hardly ever took apart a whole floor, we think. So if we get something, a date, a coins underneath the floor, we can know when the floor was laid. That hasn't been done here. That hasn't been done. But tradition says that this is one of the oldest buildings. Tradition says it didn't fall down in the earthquake because it's tucked away, it's tucked in. We're a small shul. It's built strongly. Tradition says that it was fixed up before and strengthened before. And also the way the plan with the arches here is different than the others. It's different than the Abu Hav, our neighbors.
Very much different.
The Abu Hav was certainly built again. It fell down and rebuilt with the kippah. Okay? The kippah, the domes, are not necessarily part of the ancient way they used to have. The Ari doesn't have a dome. The Alshech here doesn't have a dome. So, but this is only speculation, conjectures. I always say, even in Livnot Libanot, wherever we have to give a date, you have to make a sounding in the building itself. And all other people can say what they believe, that having arches like these, you can find them already in the time of the Mamluks, 500-600 years ago. But arches like these were built even 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So that's what I can say. But the bima here is ancient. We don't know exactly how much. I like to say that the Alshech Zatzal stood on the bima here. You can imagine him standing on the bima. You can imagine the Ari walking in and listening to his lecture here on this bima. Okay? Unless prove otherwise. Okay? If we'd be standing here in the time of the earthquake in 1837, I don't know, did it fall down? It maybe not have fallen down. So, that's not history. That's already architecture and archaeology. So let me say just one last thing in the last minute or two. In the 16th century, when the great rabbis were here, we'll be talking about Rabbi Yosef Karo, the greatest of them, I'm already telling you now. It doesn't mean that the Jews started coming in the 16th century. I told you already there were Jews here before. But the immigrants to Tzfat also didn't start in the 16th century. In the 15th century, they started coming. Even in the 14th century, they started coming. People came to Tzfat. They mentioned that many rabbis come to be buried in Tzfat before the 16th century. Okay? I also want to remind everybody that the Inquisition, that the expulsion of the Jews from Spain didn't begin in 1492. Already in 1391, the Jews were expelled from Barcelona, Girona, from northern Spain. And Jews started coming to Israel, not only to Tzfat. They went to Yerushalayim, they went to Gaza, and they came to Tzfat also. So it wasn't that at the beginning, it wasn't that, I'll be telling you soon, that Yosef Karo, when he comes to Tzfat in 1536, I like to say that's the beginning of the Golden Age. It doesn't mean that there weren't rabbis here in Tzfat before. There were rabbis here in Tzfat before. Okay, not only Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, there were other rabbis, Rabbi Yosef Saragosi, who some people say began the Yosef Bana'ah synagogue down below, right below us. So there were Jews here in Tzfat also. Tzfat was probably the most important Jewish center already from the 14th century and on. But the 16th century was the explosion that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Shkoyach.